Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our participants from all around the world. You're most welcome to this interesting discussion where we'll be looking at creating space for women to trade. Thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate International Women's Day. We have about 200 participants that we expect to join today, and you're all very, very welcome. Happy Women's Day to you all. My name is Annette Semwemba. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Executive Secretariat for the EIF at the WTO, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this discussion. We have before us a prominent panel of speakers who'll share their experiences in supporting women economic empowerment and the perspectives they have gained from their important work, especially in light of the impact from COVID-19. We will discuss the importance of creating a gender-responsive trade ecosystem to help women integrate and move up in value chains. And for information, some of you might be aware, but if you're not, about 2 years ago, the EIF launched an initiative designed to enhance women economic empowerment. And I'm pleased to note that our panel members are all working with us in various ways to ensure that this initiative delivers results. Today, you hear some of that work that is ongoing. And our goal today is to reflect on the important role that women play in trade and ways in which we can all contribute to their greater inclusion in trade, and more so in this difficult environment. And I hope that you'll all come away with fresh ideas, thought-provoking perspectives, and new ways of working. We will soon hear from our Executive Director that will present a welcome statement, Dr. Ratnaka Adhikari, Executive Director of the EIF, who is also a gender champion. And thereafter, he will have the honor to present to us a keynote address from Her Excellency Mrs. Kemani Losena, the Minister of Industry and Commerce for Lao PDR. I'll then invite our panel to share their experiences and perspectives, and thereafter we will open the floor for discussions. Please note that we have simultaneous interpretation in French available. It's at the bottom of your screen. And if you're facing any technical difficulties, just send us a chat and we will deal with it immediately. And if you'd like to ask any questions, just type your name, where you're from, and your question in the chat box, and we'll take it up in the Q&A segment. And so without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Ratnaka Adhikari for his welcome remarks. You're welcome, Ratnaka. You have the floor.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. And happy International Women's Day to all of you. I warmly welcome you all to today's panel discussion on creating space for women in trade during COVID-19. The EIF has remained committed to women economic empowerment and gender equality in the LDCs right from its inception. To further deepen our efforts towards women economic empowerment and the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 5, as Annette mentioned just now, 2 years back, on this very day, we launched our initiative, Empower Women, Power Trade, EWPT for short. In the past 2 years, we have strengthened our partnership to support the LDCs in integrating gender responsive measures into trade and development policies and programs. We have integrated gender analysis across the Diagnostic Trade Integration Study, DTIS process, providing countries with the opportunities to leverage additional resources and expertise to respond to the challenges faced by women in workforce. We have continued to advocate for women to have a voice at the decision-making table. Most of our beneficiary countries have women or women group represented in their National Steering Committee, which is the apex body in each of the LDCs that we have created in order to steer the project implementation process. All our projects include and track gender-specific targets As a result, over half of our current investment in productive capacity building is in women-centric value chain, and 54% of all productive sector beneficiaries are women. I'm also happy to report that through our EWPT initiative, we have been able to channel funding to 4 projects that are exclusively aimed at creating a gender-responsive trade ecosystem to help women integrate and move up in value chain. We have strengthened our effort, but it is not enough. That is why we should hashtag choose to challenge ourselves and aim to do more and better. We know that COVID-19 pandemic is continuing to take a toll on peoples across the globe, but its impact on women has been disproportionately high. According to a recent report by McKinsey, female joblessness rates resulting from the pandemic are about 1.8 times those of males. And the IMF has warned that COVID-19 threatens to roll back the last 30 years of economic gains for women. The pandemic could halt the already slow progress toward gender parity and exacerbate inequalities. We cannot allow this pandemic to turn back the clock on women's economic empowerment. We need to take action now more than ever. We need to support women to implement solutions that underpin new business models. It is critical for us to maintain an intentional focus on helping women to grow and nurture their nascent micro businesses. On institutional fronts, policymakers need to measure the pandemic's scaring effect on women. Adopting gender-sensitive regulations and policies is a must now. It is time to build back better and also to build back equal. We have a prominent panel today, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing the panelist perspective on how we can create a space for women in trade going forward. With these words, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker, Her Excellency Mrs. Kimeni Polsena. Mr. Polsena used to be the EIF focal point in Lao PDR. She has championed the gender work in various capacities with inspiring success stories. Mr. Polsena is not able to join us in person today, but she has kindly sent us a recorded message. My team will play her message now, following which I look forward to a productive delivery. I thank you for your kind attention.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to address today at this virtual event organized by the EIF in commemoration of its initiative, Empower Women, Power Trade. This event is very timely, not only because it is being held today, International Women's Day, but also because it is happening at a time when we are suffering from the impacts of COVID-19. When women as workers and business owners are being hit hard, they are losing jobs, and this is a call for action. There has been 2 years since EIF has been launched, the Empower Women, Power Trade initiative, which brings partners together to find ways to support women integrating in the value chain during the COVID-19 pandemic. I understand that projects have been launched which are specifically aligned to the initiative. I would like to congratulate the EIF and its partners. Since Lao PDR joined the EIF in 2004, we have been working closely to promote gender dimensions in the National Development Agenda and to support women in productive sectors. particularly those in remote and disadvantaged areas. Through EIF and other development partners supported projects, as well as government programs, we have been providing opportunities for women to improve their skills and to participate in the economy, to enhance their productivity and income. Last year, despite COVID-19 pandemic, we managed to support 125 women-led households in 6 villages of 3 northern provinces of Lao PDR to improve their textile handicraft products and to form partnerships with leading firms to export their products. Approximately 1,000 items were produced and sold, created more than annual income of the households. Through our business assistance facility under the Lao Competitiveness and Trade Projects, we have approved more than 100 grants to support individual private enterprises with business development services through a matching grant facility and helping them raise their competitiveness. To date, 60% of approved grants have been disbursed to women-led firms, and 68% of total disbursed grants went to women-led enterprises. The results are very encouraging. To assist SMEs, we have also mobilized domestic resources and development partners, particularly the World Bank, to establish lines of credit to improve SME access to long-term and affordable finance. More than 300 SMEs benefited from the line of credit facility, 58% of which are owned and managed by women. But this is not enough. Lao PDR has continuously made our utmost efforts to put in place gender-inclusive policies and to create enabling environment for women entrepreneurs to thrive. For example, Lao Trade Policy, Trade and Private Sector Development Roadmap focus on sustainable and inclusive growth with specific attention to gender equality. The ongoing DTIS update looks at gender dimensions at both macro and sector-specific level in order to identify priority actions to ensure gender equality and inclusiveness in our development course. Recently, we officially launched the first project-level Gender Strategic Action Plan for the Lao PDR Competitiveness and Trade Project to mainstream a gender dimension in all project interventions. In addition, gender focal points have been appointed at all implementing agencies to coordinate the implementation and monitoring the said action plan in relevant agencies. Specific targets for gender mainstreaming are fully integrated in the project results framework, which is being updated on a semi-annual basis. Our efforts have started to bear fruits. However, disruption of global value chains have hit our community of women hard. We are doubling our efforts, but support from partners and concerted action are required. I hope the discussion today will help us to learn more about best practices and measures to support women in difficult times. Wish all Happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ratnaka, for your message, your opening statement, and our gratitude goes to the Minister, Her Excellency, for her inspiring message. We've had excellent work that's ongoing, but the challenges remain. We'll now move on to our conversation today, and I'll take a few moments to introduce our panel. So as I call out your names, please just wave so that our participants can recognize you. Miss Dorothy Thoma, she's from the International Trade Center, where she's the Deputy Executive Director. And prior to that, she was part of the team at the EIF as Executive Director, and previously Chief Trade Negotiator and Director for Foreign Trade in the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry of Zambia. She's got a wealth of experience in gender, trade development, and policy making. And we're really, really pleased that she's here with us today. And next is Dorothy, another Dorothy Thoma, who's an international trade and development expert with over 25 years in international development and working very, very closely in women's entrepreneurship with over 8,000 women entrepreneurs. She was previously past chair of the East Africa Women in Business Platform, representing over 20,000 women entrepreneurs from the East African community region. We also have with us Ms. Doreen Bodan-Martin. She's the director of the ITU Telecommunications Development Bureau, and she's the first woman in ITU history to hold one of the top organization elected management positions. She's a strategic leader with over 30 years of high-level experience in international and intergovernmental relations, with a long history of success in policy, strategy development, analysis, and execution. We have Ms. Simonetta Zarilli. She's the chief of the Trade, Gender, and Development Program of UNCTAD, and a program that she's been leading since its inception in 2010. She's an experienced trade analyst with many years of a successful career with the UN, and she's worked on a number of trade and development issues. And finally, the gentleman on our panel today, Mr. Nitin Madan, who's a consultant on women's entrepreneurship for UNESCO and with the Women's World Banking as well in Cambodia. And Nitin has more than 16 years of experience on financial inclusion, technical assistance, policy advocacy, entrepreneurship development. And we're really, really pleased to have such an excellent lineup. I thank you all for joining us. I see that we have over 100 participants that have joined us as of now, and we hope that many more can join us. So let's get this started. So I'll start with you, Dorothy, ITC, Dorothy Tembo. There's two Dorothys here. And I really, really want to recognize the role that the ITC plays as a key partner for the EIF in implementing a number of initiatives, especially those around women through the She Trades initiative. And recently, Dorothy, I understand there's a policy brief that's been published on building back better, and it's highlighting how women entrepreneurs are facing lots of challenges due to the shifts in global value chains and the policy environment as a result of the COVID pandemic. And I want us to begin our conversation here, Dorothy. What have you seen? How are women adapting? What's going on in the environment? What can you tell us about some of the key issues that you have observed over the last year?
Thank you very much, Annette, and good morning to everybody. I first want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to join this distinguished panel this morning. A very happy International Women's Day to everybody. Perhaps before I get into the specific question that you've posed, I thought it might be helpful for me to kind of contextualize, because listening to some of what I will say later on could also give the indication that perhaps things are well and all is good for women, and we perhaps just need to leave them going on their own. But the reality I think that we are dealing with is one that is very different. First point I wanted to make is that the way that goods and services are produced, distributed, and indeed consumed has changed due to the pandemic. The second point, which is more of a caveat, is the fact that we've had a disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on women in business. From the work that we have done, we have established that 64% of those that responded to our surveys, that is the women, have indicated that they have been adversely affected in comparison to the 52% that we had with respect to the men folk. So this is the scenario that we have, but we also are very much aware that the situation for women has been one that we have been trying to push forward in terms of trying to get them to get to the center of ensuring that they're taking advantage of the economic opportunities, and in particular the trade opportunities. So we are in a situation where the reality is that the pandemic has only made an already wanting situation being more demanding. Women have continued to face the many challenges which have been outlined by the Executive Director of the EIF Secretariat and also by the Minister. So in the interest of time, I will not go into this. The issue perhaps I wanted to put on the table is that understanding this context, it is very, very clear to me that in no way should we be under the illusion that the need and the role of women in trade is one that has diminished by the mere fact of the circumstances that I've explained. If anything, this role has actually increased, and hence the need for us to create a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable future. And it only goes to underscore the message that we must ensure that we are building back better together in a way that allows us to not only assess, but also mitigate the effects of the crisis. And indeed, even in this challenging situation, there are opportunities that have been created, and therefore leveraging these opportunities is an aspect that we really need to forge ahead on. At the center of all this are the micro, small, and medium enterprises, because they are the backbone of the LDC economies. And we therefore must make sure we try to not only understand the prevailing situation, but how we can support these businesses. So specific to your question, what are the women businesses doing and what can be done for them is really the summary of what you pose. And here I would see this anchored in at three levels. One is what the businesses themselves are doing. Second aspect is what the business support organizations can potentially do. And third, it's on the policy side. And here again, the EIF spoke to that aspect at length. Key in all this for businesses is that they have to be agile and ready to adjust their business models to align with the changes. Otherwise, they will not survive. I think being innovative and thinking outside the box is what needs to happen. But it's also clear that we have a broad spectrum of businesses that we are dealing with. Some have that capability, others don't. And those that don't, we need to ensure that we are giving that hand-holding to make them think outside the box, to be able to work with them on the specific interventions so that they too can be able not only perhaps to sustain their business, but to also reposition going forward. In many cases, we have seen those that are able to assimilate and understand what is going on around them. They've perhaps been a little bit ahead of others that are really not in a position to even understand what is happening and how they then can be able to position themselves for going forward. What does this practically mean? What we have established is that in practical terms, we have seen companies rebuilding their operations by rethinking and adapting different levels of production, e.g., changing their production lines to align with new demands. I think the underlying issue there being for most of them, it was or it has been an issue of survival. How do they get to start going onto a path that helps them to recover the revenue that will help them to be able to continue producing, but will also help them to invest in new areas should that be the need that is there. And here is where we have seen that there's a lot of support that actually needs to be provided. The third point perhaps I wanted to make here is that of, in thinking differently, that you're also starting to think about the environment. Can we utilize more environmentally sustainable means of production, such as those relating to renewable energy, water and waste management, etc.? Initially, this might be costly for some of the businesses, but we have also seen where businesses have applied this, that in the long term, they're actually looking at saving some of the costs in production. In any case, we want to be in a better world. And linked to that, I think it also opens other opportunities for potential accessibility to green financing. Access to finance, we have heard, is one of the key issues that is still confronting many women. So being innovative in terms of trying to tap on the different pots of finances that are available is one that remains useful. And here, just to say that from our side, we, through the East African Community, EU-funded markup project is working with farmers that include women in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, in Kenya, and Burundi to advance efforts on using sustainable or environmentally friendly processes of production. Fourth dimension is just very quickly connecting to global value chains, I think remains very much an integral part. For Africa in particular, where you have 33 of the LDCs, leveraging of the regional value chains to go global will certainly be key, and the CFTA has a key role to play there. Diversification is something that we cannot run away from. And I think in trying to reposition and change the production side of things, plus the diversification, we have seen some of our companies that we are working with, particularly in some of the LDCs, shifting their production processes to move from producing textiles into producing masks, which were very much something that was required in the I shouldn't say in the aftermath, just at the time that COVID came into play. But of course, it is one that continues to very much be there. We have seen this in Bangladesh, where we have Tarango, a company that we are working with, shifting by the very fact that what they had produced and were ready to export were items which were stopped because of the different measures that were put in place. And they had to find another way of survival. Instead, they found that they could supply masks to Germany, which was the shift that was made. The same in Gambia, where we are working together. The youth there shifted their production to produce masks, in this particular case, used for the domestic market. 40,000 masks were produced through the project where we are collaborating. Sixth point is the leveraging of digital technologies. And here, I will not go into detail because this has been spoken to much. I wanted to touch on something very quickly, which is the access.
I'll let you come back, Dorothy. I'll let you come back at some point. I picked a really, really important point that you raised. It's not business as usual for businesses. It's different, and businesses need to adapt. And you had a point, I think it was your fourth, on value chains. And I want to bring in Dorothy at this point. She's working very, very closely with Northern Uganda and South Sudan on the shea value chain, and putting into perspective what we just heard from you, Dorothy, on some of these challenges. I want Dorothy to throw light on those challenges in perspective, looking at the shea value chain. Dorothy Thoma, over to you. How have women coped? What have been your observations, and how resilient have they been in moving up the value chain?
Thank you, Annette, and happy Women's Day to everyone. The project that we are working on at the East African Women in Business platform is concerned with the shea value chain. And the project is being implemented in South Sudan and in northern Uganda. We're targeting about 7,400 participants in this project. And the idea is to work with them to help them improve the quality of their products, increase their efficiency of production so that they can, first of all, produce more, but also produce it at the quality that will get them decent pricing and improve their lives that way. In relation to COVID, I would say one of the big challenges that the women faced on the ground in terms of actually being able to harvest the nuts, for example, or harvest the fruit, the shea fruit, Uganda underwent curfew. During that time, people were only allowed to move between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. in northern Uganda. Well, the right time to pick the fruit off the ground is 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So effectively, they were left with 1 hour with which to collect the fruit, the fruit that holds the shea nut. And so this turned out to be a challenge for them in the sense that they didn't have enough harvest hours out there in the field. And also because the fruit ended up, staying on the ground. And if it was left there too long, then it would deteriorate. So that was one of the challenges that the nut collectors faced on the ground. I would say if you move just a little bit up the value chain to women in export, women who are processing and exporting the shea nut, one of the challenges was around transportation. Again, because of the restrictions on travel, restrictions on transport, it meant it was hard to identify vehicles that would transport the shea butter in whichever form it was, or the shea items in whatever form they were. And another thing that was connected to that was the long queues at the border. So for example, women exporting shea butter to Kenya, the transporters, were stuck at the border for days on end. And that also affected, obviously, the speed with which product could be delivered to customers. What that ended up doing was, shipment that would normally take a few hours, 15 hours from Uganda to Nairobi would end up taking 2 to 3 months. So these are some of the delays, and these are real delays for which they were it was very difficult to find solutions to get around. But I'd also like to talk about, and there's a long list of issues, but I just want to talk a little bit also, Annette, about some of the really interesting things that are happening as a result of the project and also in connection to COVID. And one of those is because people could not, because of the restrictions on travel, because of a lot of shutdowns going on, some of the women in our project were motivated to cultivate stronger relationships with their customers via WhatsApp, via Facebook. And so here comes IT playing a big role. And because of that, actually have one of our participants called Lillian in Uganda ended up actually being recommended to new customers just because her current customer base was so happy with this continued dialogue and the deepening relationship via social media, via IT-based solutions. And so she ended up expanding her market base. She is now exporting to the Democratic Republic of Congo, which she wasn't doing before. She's got a couple of new customers there. And she also increased her customer base size in Kenya. So, this is, I showcase that as sort of the positive side of what's happening and how women are using IT to grow their businesses, growing sales via Facebook. But of course, on the other hand, again, when you look at the woman who's right down deep in the communities where these shea trees are growing and where the nuts are harvested, a lot of the women participating in our project actually do not have phones, which was, I was surprised that in this day and age, there are people functioning without phones, and that means that population is actually going to be excluded from the whole IT revolution unless something is done to provide them with that connectivity. I think I'll stop there for now and come back to other points later.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dorothy. And for me, I think there's always a silver lining. There's always a silver lining. We've seen opportunities that have come through irrespective of the situation. And I think listening to you and Dorothy before you, you've demonstrated clear opportunities that came out of this difficult situation. It doesn't mean that the challenges were wiped away. They remained, but women are resilient. Women are resilient. And it leads me to our next speaker. I'm moving on to Doreen. Doreen is doing excellent work in the digital space. And Dorothy, you just mentioned earlier that digital literacy is very, very low in the value chain where you're working. And she's trying to address these challenges in Burundi, Ethiopia, in Haiti, and in a lot of the work that IT is doing. So over to you, Doreen, in this day and age where we would anticipate that there's a digital equity that doesn't seem to be the issue, that doesn't seem to be, remains a problem. So how is ITU support in bridging this gap and mainstreaming gender issues in digital policies, helping women entrepreneurs to benefit from opportunities?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Annette, and happy International Women's Day, everyone. It's great to be here. And thank you, Dorothy, for highlighting the role of IT. It's a perfect sort of segue for me to jump in. I think by way of perspective, it's important to note that half the world is still not connected to the internet. And of course, closing the digital divide is not a simple task. I would argue that it's perhaps one of the biggest challenges of our time. Of course, COVID has put the spotlight on this, and has put the spotlight on what it means to be digitally excluded. And to close that divide, we're going to need global cooperation, leadership, and innovation. Working towards this overarching goal, I think, involves simultaneously addressing the gendered aspects of the digital divide. And while the digital gender gap is small in developed countries, it's much larger in developing countries. So in developing countries, it's sort of 1 in every 4 women that has access to the internet. And when we look at the least developed countries, it's 1 in 7. So that's really very alarming for us. So we've been prioritizing our work to look at how to develop tools that can help policymakers, regulators, to really ensure that gender is incorporated into digital policies. To mainstream gender issues, we believe will go a long way into unlocking opportunities for women to benefit from the digital economy, but it's not something that is systematically embraced. When we look at policies of our 193 member states, about 30% more or less actually have references to gender and women's access to ICTs. So we look at this sort of through 3 main focus areas: through assessing, through engaging, and capacity building. On the assessment side, we're reviewing existing policies related to the digital economy to see countries' gender responsiveness. On the engagement side, we're promoting dialogues on digital transformation and digital inclusion of women. We'll be kicking off our gender track this afternoon of the World Summit on the Information Society Forum. We also focus through the capacity building lens. So trying to sensitize policymakers to look at advocacy, tailored trainings, guidance on developing and reformulating gender responsive policies and regulations. It is important that we also understand what we're up against, because when we look at the digital gender divide, there's lots of barriers that are holding girls and women back. And that ranges from lack of affordable access to infrastructure and devices, that lack of digital skills, Annette, you just mentioned that, the lack of relevant and accessible content, concerns about online safety, gender discrimination, entrenched stereotypes, cultural norms, and also lack of visible role models. That's another barrier that we see. And we think that these gender-friendly digital policies can increase women's engagement and participation in the digital economy. Policies that are linked to access and the skills that go with it, developing digital literacy, facilitating web-based female entrepreneurship, empowering women financially through innovative digital financial tools and e-governance. We believe that this will open up a wide range of opportunities for women. And of course, in our partnership with EIF under the Empower Women, Power Trade initiative, that's the way we see that we can get there. We can facilitate the improvement of policy and regulatory environments through dialogue and open and innovative discussions with women policymakers in the private sector. And we see that through this initiative, hundreds of public officials will gain new tools to mainstreaming the gender perspective in their administrations. Government officials from partner countries, including, of course, women policymakers, will be benefiting from increased capacity to develop and implement those gender responsive policies that we so desperately need. The project also aims to implement a consultative mechanism, bringing together stakeholders from all different groups. For us, that multi-stakeholder approach is absolutely critical in creating that shared ownership of national policies. And then finally, effective dialogue across ICT, education, and gender ministries is also a necessity to reach our goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Excellent insights. The digital gender divide remains huge problems from various perspectives, depending on how you look at it. But I now want to move on to an issue that's around financing, because we all understand access to finance remains a major challenge. So from a COVID-19 pandemic insights, I want Nitin to talk to us about the work that they do and his experience in supporting women to access finance, entrepreneur development, and women's financial inclusion. I think in view of COVID, things have been completely different, and new innovative approaches have had to be explored. So Nitin, would you please share with us your views and your perspectives?
So thank you very much, Annette, for that introduction and the question. Yes, COVID has definitely thrown open a lot of questions for the financial services industry. They've really had to rethink in terms of how to approach customers, right? We have this model where group lending relies on human touch points. How do we continue therefore to provide finance in a situation of lockdowns and social distancing? And I think a number of the organizations have gone digital, and that's the route that they seem to have taken, to rely more on digital channels. We've heard a little bit about this from the previous panelists. We've heard also a lot about how products have been changed, how many of the organizations have helped clients repurpose their business. Many clients who are doing tailoring, for example, have started to work on PPE equipment manufacturing. So I think there are these examples of how financial services have gone from a spectrum of just rescheduling loans to actually helping their clients repurpose their business. But I think what it has definitely shown is that we need more data, and that's still coming in. It takes time, particularly in the context of lockdowns and social distancing. But there are some examples of how data has helped organizations to sort of reconfigure their strategy. To give you an example, data has told an organization that look, everybody is not in the same amount of trouble, right? And so therefore you need to figure out who is really struggling, and who is not struggling as much, and therefore who should you apply the rescheduling policy to, right? Because that has an impact on how you yourself as an institution access funds, right? It has an impact on your portfolio at risk as well, right? So it's very, very critical to actually start pulling in data, right? And to disaggregate this data. Now, this is where we come up with a bit of a challenge, right? Because when you ask many of the financial institutions, are you doing gender disaggregated data analytics? And the answer is quite often no, right? It's very general. The categorizations are based on geography or maybe trades and occupations, and I think what it boils down to is how many financial institutions actually have a gender strategy in place, right? And my experience to me suggests that when I ask an organization, do you have a gender strategy? Yes, we do. What is it? We give loans only to women, right? That's not a gender strategy, right? Are you disaggregating data? If you have a gender strategy that you claim to have. And the answer comes back, unfortunately, that no, we're not. So you're pulling up data, for example, client feedback, but you don't always necessarily tend to disaggregate the data by gender. So I think for me, that's one of the real issues when we're talking of how do we build a response to COVID, is to say that let's get more data, let's disaggregate this data by gender, right? Because we really need to understand what's going on, and even within gender data. Intersectionality becomes important, right? We keep saying MSMEs, but MSMEs are micro, small, and medium, and there is a difference, right? And unfortunately, what happens is when we talk of MSMEs, the conversation very quickly and early on shifts towards the SME side of things, right? It's easier, they're more formalized, there's more data available, and so it's easy to talk about them also, right? So we really need to get into the data and to see how COVID has really impacted many of the women, many of the businesses that women run, and how do financial institutions then build a response to that, right? But what this is also shown to us is that there are actually very, very deep-rooted structural issues, right? And some of these have already been discussed, right? So we can talk of an immediate response based on data. But the question is, how do we build back better? And the only way to build back better is that we need to look at the structures that are in place, right? You look at human capital, right? There is an issue there. There is a low level of participation, when it comes to mobile technology. It has to do with digital skills that women have, right? In a survey that She Investments in Cambodia did of 75 women entrepreneurs, 75 or 72, 96% said that they would rate themselves as poor or very poor on digital skills, right? You look at cultural issues, right? Particularly in the LDCs in South Asia, there is a perception, right, that women are less outgoing, they lack the skills and leadership, right? So, and this has an impact on how your application is viewed by a male loan officer, right? You are likely to get a lower amount of money. Then there is the dual role that women often play as caregivers and other domestic responsibilities. This holds them back very often from exploring new markets, right? There are language skills related to exploring more markets. So these are some of the demand side structural issues, right? But at the core of a lot of this is the culture, and this is the socio-cultural aspects that actually inhibit growth, right? To give you a very simple example in the Cambodian context, you have what is called as the Chap Saray, which is rules for women and girls, right? You have a similar rules for men and women, and the Ministry of Women Affairs has worked to getting that set of rules out of the core curriculum, though an abridged version is still taught, right? And that actually subordinates women to men, right? Those set of rules. And that has an impact on confidence, which has an impact on how women feel when they approach a bank, right? You talk to microfinance organizations and they tell you that the minute the loan amount starts to increase, women tend to back away, women entrepreneurs, and the male counterpart tends to take over the discussions, right? So all of this has a huge impact on for example, getting a business license and formalization of business, which then has an impact on access to funds for growth. And, therefore women tend to, remain in the micro segment. And when you look at numbers from different geographies, in Cambodia, for example, 62% of micro enterprises are owned by women, whereas, 25% SMEs are owned by women. In a country like Fiji, it's even lower. It's just about 1.5% of enterprises that are actually women owned, right? So, so really, at the heart of it all are these structural issues that we need to start talking about. I don't hear enough conversation around the cultural aspects of what we do. right? And I think that's unfortunate. We do need to do this when it comes to policy. There are also issues there, right? The approach has to be, data-driven policy, but then where is the data, right? At the end of the day, what we value, we'll measure, and what we measure, we can manage, right? So if you're not collecting data on women entrepreneurs, then you're in all probability not likely to have products that are more suited to the cultural context or that women face when it comes to access to finance. So I'll stop there for now. And
thank you very, very much, Nitin. Very provoking thoughts there, Nitin. And I think reflecting on what we just learned, there's an issue there around the policy environment as well. And you did mention that you don't hear enough of the conversation around some of these issues, mainly because maybe there's no policy that governs or that guides how these issues should be mainstreamed. Issues around gender disaggregation, those issues should be mainstreamed in policy. And I think this brings us to Simonetta, who's working really, really hard building capacity around mainstreaming of gender and priorities in different trade policy and sectoral policies that are linked to trade and instrumental for women economic empowerment. So Simonetta, I will be with you shortly. I'll just let our participants know that after Simonetta, I'll open the floor and we will address some of the questions that have come through. So Simonetta, having listened to all the panel members and taking into consideration all the work that you're doing and what you've learned over time, we see that there are a number of traditional approaches to gender mainstreaming, but the new normal requires adaptation and the disruptions need to be dealt with in a different way. So how can we continue to mainstream gender issues in trade policies, looking at the value chains, but also taking into account COVID pandemic?
Thank you, Annette. Hello to everybody, and happy International Women's Day. And thank you for having me on this distinguished panel. I think the first thing to say is that having gender considerations included in the trade discourse is a quite recent development. Until a few years ago, the trade community held the position that the trade was gender neutral because the tariffs, the non-tariff measures, etc., apply to women and men in the same way. This switch for the trade communities to start thinking that the trade policy is among the policies that can be used for achieving a gender equality result is a quite more recent phenomenon. And as everything that is still quite new, there is there are knowledge gaps. There are trade policymakers across countries and regions that who are very keen to make their trade policies more gender responsive, but in some cases the knowledge gap is impeding to move forward in this direction. This is why we have joined forces with the EIF in a project that is meant to deliver online courses to policymakers, but also to civil society, to the business community, and to academicians. And the purpose is to understand better how trade and gender are related and how trade policies can become more gender sensitive. Now, we have learned through the presentations of the speakers who took the floor before me, all the problems women already had to become, to benefit from international trade and to be active in the economy were magnified by the pandemic. So we know, for instance, that these bad effects were due to the fact that many women work in kind of casual part-time occupations, that many women work in the informal sector, that women work in services. Many women at present, services is the main employer for women, and the services sector was particularly hit by the social distancing and travel restrictions measures. As we heard from Nadine, there is women traditionally have a problem of getting access to credit. And in a time of crisis, if there is no access to credit, enterprises are going to die. So this difficulty in accessing credit has had a bad impact on women enterprises. And then we know that the amount of household responsibilities have increased because of the closing of schools, of daycare facilities, etc. Now, many countries, basically all countries, have put in place rescue measures. And very few of these rescue measures are really targeting women. On the other hand, looking at the positive side of the coin, we know that many measures are targeting SMEs or micro, small and medium enterprises, though as we heard from Nadine, they are different. They cannot be easily put on the same basket. Measures are supporting specific sectors, for instance, tourism, that is a sector that employs many women, and also measures have put in place to protect workers on the informal sector. So all these measures, though they were not meant specifically for women, they benefit women. But we also know that these measures are time-bound. We all hope that soon we will come back to a kind of normality, and many of these measures will be dismantled. So what will happen? How can we ensure that we don't go back to business as usual, but we do a bit better? Then, of course, there are measures that can be taken that are specifically trade measures, other measures that are a combination of different policies. For instance, we heard from Doreen and from the two Dorothys on this problem of access to internet. We know that during the pandemic, there was a boom of e-commerce. But how many women were really able to benefit from it? And this brings us back to the issue of women not having enough access to the internet, not having enough literacy to deal with the internet and to use it not only as an instrument for information, but also as an instrument for business. And overall, the problem is a problem of education and skill development, expanding the sectors where women can work. Because if we saw through the experience of the pandemic that many women were dismissed because they were working in kind of low-level, casual, temporary jobs, part-time jobs. This is also linked to, so they were the first one to be dismissed because these are the first jobs to go in a time of crisis. So we know that this is connected to the need for better education, more diversified education that would allow women to work in sectors that are expanding from a trade point of view. Specifically for SMEs, policies that support the SMEs and support access to credit with all the caveats that we heard before are also very very important. Now let me switch to a small example that I would like to share that can be added to the other examples provided by the former speakers. The pandemic has very much impacted the activities of women, informal and small-scale cross-border traders. So in most cases, they could just not cross the border, or crossing the border became extremely expensive because of the health certificates, the tests they had to provide it, etc. So we are working with the women in Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia in specific border posts. And what we discovered, going back to the resilience and to women being innovative and coming up with new ideas. One was that since they couldn't cross the border, or crossing the border was becoming very expensive, they would just rely on trucks that could transport the goods. So instead of crossing the border and buy the goods, crossing back and selling in local markets, they were relying on trucks that could bring the goods back and forward. Of course, this implied a reduction in their incomes because they had to pay for the trucks, but still this kept the business alive. So these women kept trading, and for most of them, this activity is really a saving for the household, is the income that makes this household survive. But other women also decided to have parallel activities in agriculture. So waiting for things to be better, for improvements, they were switching to producing agricultural goods. So these are just examples how even in very difficult situations, women have been able to find alternatives. Of course, there is also the shortcoming that because of the new rules applying at the border, more women have been tempted to go through the informal paths that include a lot of risk, even physical risk of confiscation. But here is very important that border authorities and the trade authorities are working to make sure that cross-border trade continue, and that this activity that is so important, not only for women, but for countries, can continue going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simonetta. And for me, I think it's those practical examples that are really, really important for our participants, because they hear firsthand how other participants in trade have adapted their businesses, new approaches. And I will now start to take a few questions, but I would like to go back to Dorothy. Dorothy, Deputy Executive Director at ITC. She had some really, she had a few points left that she wanted to share with us. And in addition, Dorothy, I have a really interesting question here that I hope you can take together as you finish up on some of those points that were around what you have observed. We have a question from Anna from Hungary, and she asks, how is e-commerce working in Africa? And how can the MSMEs use the e-commerce for exporting their products? And I know, Dorothy, you work a lot with MSMEs. And she also wanted to know, what are the areas where women can reach bigger success in industry or trade, including services? So as you finish off your points, please infuse her responses to this question.
Thank you very much, Annette. I think much of what I would have said has been covered by colleagues, but maybe just to add very quickly, I think the points that have been put on the table are ones that are very valid on the digital penetration. And here, perhaps the point I wanted to add is that it's not enough for governments to put in place policies. They must also be able to invest in infrastructure to support the efforts that are being made. For instance, on the digital side, very much an issue also of having the countries themselves taking a step forward and prioritizing infrastructure on the ICT side, because admittedly, it is very clear that in many of the countries, this is also a challenge, which makes communication much harder. The second point I wanted to just quickly add is relating to data management. And here, again, by way of giving examples, we as an organization have embarked on this initiative where we have a tool which we refer to as the Outlook, which is precisely looking at the issues that were raised, which is addressing the data side of it, but also on the policy side. We've done this work with 42 countries, and interestingly, what is emerging from the work that we have done is that in many of these countries, they didn't even recognize this as a problem. So having those conversations and trying to highlight where the issues are together with them has, in actual fact, put the spotlight on these issues, which some of these governments are now taking forward. On the financial response side of things, what we have established again is that in most cases, even during the COVID period, much of what is being offered has been offered in the traditional way. So you have perhaps some packages that have been entrusted with commercial banks, and those commercial banks are providing resources as they have done in the past. Big loans, very demanding requirements, which makes it very difficult for small players such as those that we are talking about. So it's important for us to perhaps work collectively together to look at innovative ways that allow some form of de-risking and provides accessibility to those small players who want small loans and don't have the type of collateral that is being asked for. What we are doing on our part is to work with these companies to make them ready for accessibility to some of these resources that we have been able to identify, but also on the production side, making sure that they are indeed producing quality which they can sell and be able to repay the loan. So I think it's efforts around being innovative to try and establish or identify potential solutions that are not the traditional type of solutions that we have. Quickly to the question, Annette, the sectors that we have observed from our side, even though some of them are perhaps badly hit now, like tourism, it still remains that that's where the great potential still lies. So in terms of prioritization by most of these countries that have tourism as a top priority, this is where the action would really need to go. Hopefully with the vaccination programs forging ahead, we hope to be in a better place a little bit down the line. But agro-processing is another, again, as well as the professional services. Do platforms work for Africa? Absolutely. Which is why we see that some of the people have been able, some of the businesses have been able to sustain themselves during this period. As an organization, we do have a tool, and I will type in as others speak to give the detail of that, which will give you information on all platforms that people could go to and at a click of a button do this. But we also we have been working with different entrepreneurs to find solutions utilizing platforms. So it does work. We have seen the results.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. And really interesting to hear those sectors that offer potential. And I hope that our participants will do a bit more investigation, get involved, be a part of the players in those sectors. And your last point on digital platforms weaves in neatly with another question that we just received from Gloria. And I would like to address this to Doreen. I think, Doreen, you'll be in a best position to respond to this. And she says that many women-owned businesses are largely informal, and so digital transformation is key. And she says that recently Kenya introduced a digital services tax, which is likely to deter many from trading online. And she wonders what the thoughts of the panel are on this issue.
Well, thank you, Annette, and that is a good question. So indeed, digital transformation is key, and I just wanted to first highlight, and then I'll come to the tax point. Our work with EIF and this partnership that we have is focused on Burundi, Ethiopia, and Haiti. And that work is really trying to not just work with the government policymakers, but to work with women-led businesses. So in Ethiopia, we're looking at, and I'm losing my voice and it's only my first event of the day. In Ethiopia, we're looking at textiles and apparel industry. In Burundi, we're focused on agriculture. And in Haiti, we're looking at assisting women-owned businesses to try to pivot to digital. And what's great about this effort is that we're trying to share industry insights, look at step-by-step guides on the tools that will work best for each type of business, to look at how women can grow their businesses using the latest technology platforms, digital platforms, and also how to use technology, including in spaces like in product development, in production, supply and value chain, payments, and all those kinds of things, which is super exciting. Now coming to the tax issue, and I mentioned this before, the cost of connectivity is a big problem. And it's one of the biggest barriers to getting people online, whether it's men or women. It's the cost of infrastructure that Dorothy just mentioned. It's the cost of services. And so we need to find a way to strike a balance. We've been having lots of discussions with our ICT regulators, with our ICT ministries, engaging with ministries of finance, because connectivity is useless if it's not affordable, if the services are not affordable, and if the devices are not affordable. And of course, on top of that, if the skills aren't there to enable users to take advantage of what connectivity can bring to their businesses and their lives, that's also a big problem. So perhaps I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, of course, and Gloria, I hope your question is answered in some ways. There's another question, if Dorothy Tembo, you could just provide an answer in the chat. Maria would like to know, Mary Okone would like to know the sample size for the survey that was undertaken. I'll take one more question that I will address to Dorothy Thoma. And before I do that, my excellent panel of speakers, I'll be coming back to you in the end, and I will ask that you give me 3 keywords, just 3 keywords that you'd like the audience to take away. And I already have some keywords that I want you to eliminate. Please do not take my keywords. My keywords are innovation, resilience, public-private dialogue, digital platforms are important. So I've already taken away some of what you would have given me. So think, since we're supposed to be thinking outside the box, please go ahead and use this time as Dorothy responds to this question to reflect on what that will be. And then I'll come back to you. I see that the clock is ticking. So Dorothy Thoma, there's a question here from Maria Filadora, and she says, to what extent challenges faced by women trading goods differ from those faced by women trading services? Are these challenges determined by broader structural issues like limited access to skills, finance? So she really wants to know, is it easier to trade in goods or is it easier to trade in services? In simple words, over to you, Dorothy.
Thank you, Annette, and thank you, I think, Maria, for that question. Is it easier to trade in goods or services? It's such a, in school, they used to tell us to always begin a response with, it depends. And it does depend, really. It depends on the economy you're in, it depends on the environment you're in. The answer I'll give you for one country may not be the same for an answer the answer for another country. However, what I would say is that really it depends on, I'll give you the example of Uganda, for example, which I'm quite familiar with. And, you know, if you're trading in goods and the economy is locked down completely and goods cannot move from one place to another, then as a trader in goods, you're simply stuck. You're not going to be able to do anything because the system has shut down. On the other hand, if you're someone in professional services who has an audience or a clientele that is online, lockdown is not going to mean, lockdown will actually probably grow your business because more people are accessing information via the internet versus before. So I think really, Maria, unfortunately, truly the answer to your question is it depends. It depends on some of the things that you already raised, like, how skilled a person is, because if I'm super skilled and a high-level professional, it's going to be easy for me to take advantage of the internet. Whereas if I'm somebody who is offering services, but in a low-skill environment, if I'm working in maybe in retail, or if I'm working in the services industry, providing maybe wait services in tourism, then, I won't be able to physically deliver my product because everything is locked down, but via the internet, I might be able to do something interesting. So unfortunately, there's no one good answer for you, Maria. It really depends on skills. It depends on the economy. It depends on the environment. It depends on personal initiative. It depends on, because some people can make a very difficult situation actually work through their innovation and through their creative thinking. So not the silver bullet answer perhaps that you were looking for, but it really does depend. Thanks, Annette.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I think from what you've learned over the years, you need to undertake research into whatever business that you need to do, speak to others that are in that business already, try and understand the environment around that business, and go for it. Don't be held back by the challenges. Look at the opportunities and try to find solutions. So I hope that that helps. I really felt that we had an engaged audience back there. We did have a few messages coming through, and I saw a few hands. I'm really sorry we couldn't take the hands because of the time constraint. I don't really want to go over the time. I know that you've got lots of other engagements for the day, and we have about 10 minutes left. So I will be asking our panel, and I'll be starting the other way around. So I'll be starting from Simonetta and moving up. You have about a minute and a half each to give me those 5 keywords. And if in that minute and a half, you can squeeze in a sentence or two, I'm more than happy to hear from you. So over to you, Simonetta, in a minute and a half, please.
Thank you, Annette. I would use this minute and a half to advocate for ex-ante gender assessment of trade agreements and trade reforms. Instead of looking only at what a trade agreement may, the impact on the country as a whole, it is becoming very evident also through the pandemic that is essential to look at also the impacts on specific segments of the population, including on men and women. So before negotiating an agreement, during the negotiation of an agreement, it is essential to foresee what will be the impact. And if, for instance, the impact on women risk to be negative on the short term, to put in place buffer measures to allow time for moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent point, Simonetta. And I think an issue that's very, very important. And I do hope that our audience has heard and that that will be undertaken. So over to you, Dorothy. Dorothy Thoma.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I have to be specific with the 2 Dorothys in the room, but I think my 2 words, your list kept on going from 3 words to 5 words, but my 2 words, I have dream. People need to dream. My second word, and dream big. My second word is include. Include being, let's not leave anyone behind. But I think the third word I'd like to add to that is tailor. We need to tailor the solutions that we're providing. We can't keep on lumping everybody together and saying, those are women, those are MSMEs, therefore here is the solution. And I think what I'd really like to see going forward is an appreciation for the differences, the challenges that come to different groups of people. The solutions that we provide really need to be evidence-based. Otherwise, we're going to stay in the vicious cycle of no change happening. I submit.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. dreaming. I like that. I wish all my dreams came true, Dorothy. I'm still lingering and I have hope. So let's keep that hope high. Doreen, over to you.
Yeah, I like that dream as well. I'm going to say dream and inspire. I think that's great. So I think I would say gender responsive policies as one, because that's something that we don't have today. We need that. And then going back to Dorothy, the other Dorothy's point about moving from policy to sort of practice or to action, and making digital available. I think digital is the new normal, even in a post-COVID world. Ensuring that digital is affordable and that the skills are there. I'm going to say, I think you said we couldn't say partnership or cooperation, but digital cooperation,
no, please go ahead.
Partnerships are critical. And then I think it's essential to underscore that data piece that so many colleagues have mentioned, and the need to measure, because we can't move the needle if we're not measuring. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Nitin, over to you.
So thank you. I mean, I do echo a lot of what the other speakers have said. So my keywords are very similar to what they're saying. Data disaggregation by gender really matters. Confidence building, really matters. And programs that have a higher proportion of time dedicated to confidence building tend to succeed more, especially when it comes to women entrepreneurs. You didn't want me to use the word innovate, so I'm not going to use innovate, but I will say change some of the business models in terms of how we are approaching things. So there are some experiments going on with respect to collateral guarantees, for example, that bypass the need for collateral, in the name of the collateral being in the name of women. So I think these collateral guarantee experiments are quite interesting. Partnership with incubators and accelerators also become very, very important. And there is a business case there for financial institutions to actually partner with such organizations. And finally, we've spoken a lot about data. We've spoken a lot about going digital, and digital skills is important. But I think what's equally important to consider from a financial services perspective is algorithm bias, right? Algorithms in digital financial services are written by human beings, and they tend, when they sit down to start writing, biases do creep in. So as we go more and more digital, you really need to have more focus and an intentional strategy that looks at how do we prevent algorithm biases, from entering into our digital financial offering that we hope will increase access to finance for many more women out there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nitin. And I think what comes to my mind is we probably need another conversation that delves into some of these issues more deeply. And you spoke about algorithms, and in my mind, I sort of went a bit blank. So I can imagine about others that don't really know what goes on behind the scenes. And maybe our next conversation will be exactly around this issue. So please join us when we invite you next time. And finally, Dorothy, ITC, over to you.
Thanks, Annette. I think all said and fully endorsing. At the risk of being repetitive, I would say strategic partnerships key to success. Practical solutions aligned with context. And finally, if I may be allowed to borrow, we can.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Yes, we can. I agree that we can. We have seen many women that have been successful. We have seen women that have overcome barriers to be able to trade and grow their businesses. Maybe I'll just summarize in the last 3 or so minutes left what I had, and some key really stood out for me. We will have this recording on our YouTube channel, and if you'd like to access it, just let us know and we will be able to share it. I also want to draw you to the comments in the chat box. We've had lots of different pieces of information shared around resources that are available. I invite you to please have a look at that chart. So overall, my main takeaways, and I don't underestimate the other issues that I had. All of them were very, very important, but some things struck me. So please understand if I don't raise the issues that you brought to the floor. Dream, tailor, we need to ensure that we don't leave anybody behind. And that's what the EIF is here to do, actually. Make sure that the countries that need the support the most receive that support. From Dorothy, strategic partnerships, practical solutions aligned with context. The digital revolution is with us. Let's make sure that it works for women. Let's address the challenges around the gender digital divide. Lots of interesting discussions. Simonetta has just posted, no, that's Doreen, sorry, that's just posted more information about closing the digital gender gap. So I invite you to please do have a look at that. I will ask our panel to please remain online. I would like to thank all of you that have joined us. Thank you very, very, very much. I think it was an interesting discussion. I hope you went away inspired. I hope you learned something new. I hope you can take these solutions with you into your businesses as policymakers, in the processes for policy formulation, and for all partners that have been involved in this, thank you very much. And for the team behind the scenes, the team at the EIF and the communication teams in the different organizations we've worked with, thank you very much. It was a really, really interesting discussion. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. We are right on the dot. I'll ask our communications team to take a picture of us, the panel. So please stay behind. We'll have you all on screen soon. And Marie-France and her team will do the magic behind the scenes. So Marie-France,